This is the first of 3 videos for Rotary International documenting the results of an interactive workshop attempting to use Smartsettle Infinity to resolve the conflict in Kashland, which is presented as an imaginary place very much like Kashmir. The goal of the negotiation, simulated here from India's point of view, is to restore peace to the region, with discussions on a wide range of issues. The Smartsettle negotiation room has a virtual table, which is perfectly neutral, trustworthy, safe, and secure and smart, where negotiations can happen anywhere, anytime, between any number of parties. In this case, India and Pakistan are open to be assisted by the World Bank, representing the interests of the international community. The parties in the simulation were played by a group of Rotarians and friends, with varied backgrounds and interests. The players were guided by facilitators skilled at helping them achieve the best possible outcome that is satisfactory to all parties. Communication through Smartsettle is enhanced with 8 sophisticated algorithms. These algorithms are the backbone of numerous features that are designed to foster collaboration among the parties. Negotiators are able to model complicated negotiation problems, represent their preferences discreetly in a way only known to the neutral site, exchange proposals as complete packages, consider intelligent suggestions generated by the system, suggest concession packages anonymously to reduce bias, and reach a better outcome in a shorter time. After a short orientation to these algorithms and the Smartsettle process, the parties proceeded to brainstorm the most important issues to the parties that they were representing. Following is a summary of what the group produced. India, Pakistan, and China have been fighting about the Kashland borders for a long time. In our imaginary Kashland world, the relationship between those countries has improved with the formation of permanent boundaries that respect the previous lines of control that separated the areas being controlled by each country. In return, China has agreed to respect India's riparian rights to the Brahmaputra River and are not further involved in this negotiation. Only one contentious area remains, which is the Siachen Glacier. Control of water is really the root cause of the conflict. The contentious Siachen Glacier is shown at the top right. There are many water projects in various stages of completion. The main rivers here are outlined in blue, where India is in control, and in green where Pakistan is in control. These divisions were initially established by the Indus Waters Treaty, which came into effect in 1960, after 9 years of negotiation with the assistance of the World Bank. The treaty allocates the water from the Indus tributaries in the southeast, Beas, Ravi, and Sutlej, to India. This means that even though those tributaries flow into the Indus proper, India is allowed to divert and consume that water for its own use. The tributaries in the northwest, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, are allocated to Pakistan, except that India has the right to develop a water storage capacity up to 3.6 million acre-feet. Moreover, the treaty gives India the right to develop hydropower up to 20 gigawatts. Only a small amount has been harnessed so far. One example is the Kishangonga Dam, number 25 on the map, which has been diverting water since 2018, but has created some controversy. It was since decided that India would maintain low flows of at least 9 cubic meters per second into the Neelam River, the tributary to the north of the Jhelum. India is working on and has also proposed other water projects that Pakistan is concerned about. The United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, UNMOGIP, was established on the India-Pakistan border in 1949 to monitor the ceasefire called for by the United Nations Security Council, and is still operating today. However, in the meantime, both countries have acquired nuclear weapons, and the risk of their use contributes to the doomsday clock being closer than ever to midnight. Both countries recognize that the increasing hostilities that have led to each party creating nuclear weapons is only setting them up for a possible disaster. In fact, it could be so bad that the whole world would be seriously harmed. Everyone agrees that a world without nuclear weapons would be much safer. Wealthy countries would be able to help more and have tremendous incentive, but how to do so effectively remains elusive. Glaciers are melting due to increasing average global temperatures from climate change. Water flows are actually increasing by about 1% per year, but Pakistan and India will eventually need to deal with diminishing flows. More efficient irrigation practices may help for a while, but these countries may eventually need to get additional water out of the sky or pump it from the ocean. This in turn will probably depend on sources of energy that have yet to be discovered. Becoming carbon neutral as soon as possible will help to mitigate this problem. Imagine that the parties have met together in collaborative discussions and agreed to a single negotiating framework. A single negotiating framework is essentially the final agreement, except for blanks that represent issues still to be negotiated. These blanks can represent either numerical or optioned issues. The appropriate professionals have reviewed the framework, and all parties are confident that it is comprehensive, realistic, and well composed. When this framework is modeled with Smartsettle, the parties are able to negotiate with packages rather than issue by issue. A package is a complete set of values for all the issues. When the blanks are filled in with these values, this document will become the final agreement to replace the existing Indus Waters Treaty. This is a summary of the issues that represent the blanks in the single negotiating framework agreed to by the three parties. The relative importances listed opposite each issue were determined by India's representatives in their own breakout room and kept private and confidential by the system. None of the parties were privy to the private preferences of other parties. Each party saw only their own private information in the final round of negotiations. To understand what these importances mean, consider the Siachen Glacier issue worth 6 points. Obtaining permanent control of that land is worth almost as much as the hydropower development and water storage capacity combined, 7 points. Note that importance depends on the negotiating range. It is the difference between the best possible outcome and the worst possible outcome. The two most important issues each have high importance ratings, due to each being associated with a large negotiating range. This is India's private point of view within Smartsettle Infinity. On the left side are listed the same issues that we were just looking at, with a negotiating range for each issue. What India prefers on each issue is on the right-hand side. India has created some private reference packages by selecting values for each issue. No other party can see this information. The names that India has given each of these packages correspond to the rating. These packages have ratings that are determined by the relative importances and satisfaction functions assigned to the issues. There is nothing yet on the table for other parties to see. India makes sure that their preferences are well represented so that Smartsettle is able to generate the best possible packages for them. Behind each issue is a satisfaction graph that shows how India becomes satisfied on that issue. Here, India would be least satisfied with a low international contribution and most satisfied with a high contribution. This graph is close to linear, which means that the importance of the issue is nearly proportional to the range. Notice that the point on the curve for $1 billion corresponds to 10 points. That means that 1 point is worth $100 million on that part of the curve. So, with the Siachen Glacier issue being worth 6 points, we see that not conceding the glacier to Pakistan would be worth about $600 million to India. However, since India is already controlling the Siachen Glacier, the status quo is almost as good as formalizing those boundaries. The satisfaction function for water storage is concave, because India is already quite satisfied with the status quo of 3.6 million acre-feet. India has created a package named Status Quo, which represents the absolute minimum that they must receive in this negotiation. India arbitrarily sets the rating for Status Quo to 0, to make other packages easier to compare with it. Now India can easily see that their target package is worth 65 points more than the status quo, say $6 or $7 billion. This is how much India hopes to achieve in this negotiation. Let's see how that looks in satisfaction space. This view of the negotiation, after each party's preferences are well represented, is known only to Smartsettle at the neutral site. It is never revealed to anyone, even after the negotiation is over. Shown here are only 2 dimensions of that model, India versus Pakistan. Each party has privately specified a minimum level of satisfaction, below which they would never agree to. At the other side of this graph is a boundary called the efficiency frontier that represents the best possible outcomes in this negotiation. Smartsettle's objective is to help the parties reach a fair solution on the efficiency frontier that is satisfactory to everyone. The space between the minimum levels defined by the parties and the efficiency frontier is the zone of possible agreement. A smaller zone of likely agreement is defined by targets set by each party. In a process called visual blind bidding, parties are encouraged to start the bargaining phase with optimistic proposals that represent somewhat more than they would consider fair, so that they still have some room to concede, but not so much more that the other party is offended. In this example, neither party would accept the other party's optimistic because they are both outside the zone of possible agreement, but Smartsettle can generate suggestions that fall between the optimistic proposals. Some of these proposals fall in the zone of possible agreement and may be acceptable to the parties. The suggestions most likely to become an agreement are the ones that are above the target levels. An agreement is reached at the end of a session if all parties have accepted the same package. Finally, Smartsettle generates an improvement to suggest the best possible solution for all the parties. This process works for almost any negotiation that you can imagine between any number of parties. When we add the World Bank to the negotiation, the efficiency frontier becomes a surface, and the negotiation looks a whole lot more complicated, but each individual party's view does not change. India starts the bargaining process by submitting their optimistic proposal. When the other parties do likewise, all three proposals appear on the table. These initial proposals serve to narrow the negotiating ranges. The parties could continue negotiating this way, and it would be much better than negotiating issue by issue. But the Smartsettle neutral site, knowing how each party becomes satisfied, can speed up the process by generating suggestions that are more likely to be mutually acceptable. When India secretly accepts one of these suggestions, a yellow dot appears that is not visible to the other parties. If all parties accept the same package, they'll have a deal. India ends Session 1, but no agreement is reached. In Session 2, India visibly offers a concession, and also takes advantage of a feature that allows India to make an anonymous proposal. It appears on the table, masquerading as another suggestion, thus removing bias that might discourage acceptance by other parties. When India ends Session 2, they are pleased to discover that their masquerade has become the baseline. After a search for hidden value, Smartsettle offers an improvement that is worth 69 points more than the status quo and 4 points more than the baseline. After all parties accept the improvement, it becomes their final agreement. Having already prepared a sound framework worthy of international treaty status, it is a simple matter of filling it in, and their negotiation is complete. Here we see the improvement compared to the baseline and the status quo. Earlier in the presentation, we estimated that 1 point was worth about $100 million. At that rate, the improvement is worth nearly $7 billion to India compared to the status quo. The comprehensive Infinity collaboration system uses 8 sophisticated algorithms that can support the most complicated negotiations that you can imagine. There are 2 other videos in this series that show the negotiation from each of the other 2 parties' points of view. You may find these videos on the eNegotiation channel on YouTube. Thanks for watching.